The Arbinger Institute is a coaching and training company with over 40 years of experience. We help organizations and leaders transform their cultures by enabling the shift in mindset that leads to exceptional results. Learn more at www.arbinger.com. That's www.arbinger.com. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader podcast. Kimo Kippen is a native of Hawaii, a speaker and advocate for learning, and a former executive at Hilton and Marriott. He was chairman of the ATD board in 2007 and recognized by CLO magazine as Chief Learning Officer of the Year in 2015. He is currently chairman emeritus of API ASF, program director for the conference board, advisor board member of CALE, GP Strategies, Skillsoft, CTDO Next, and Education Reimagined. He is an adjunct professor at CUA and George Mason University. Kimo has an MS from Rochester Institute of Technology, a BS from University of Hawaii, and is a graduate of the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland's postgraduate program. Kimo splits his time between Hawaii and Poland. Hi, Kimo. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Anne. Good to hear you.
So that's an impressive resume and certainly a rich career path that you have followed in talent development. And I've had the pleasure to know and work with you for many years, Kimo. And I can say with certainty that you are a legend in the talent development profession. I appreciate the passion you have for the field and the generosity you continually extend as you give back your time and talents in the variety of roles that you now hold. So I'm excited that you're on the Talent Development Leader podcast today. I know our listeners are probably pumped to hear from you, to hear more about your career in talent development, some of your reflections, and also some of your predictions as far as trends go in the field. So we're going to talk about those things today.
Sounds great.
First of all, I'd love to talk about the talent development profession, particularly your career path there, some of the things that you've done, some of the ideas you have for how the field has changed, and what your purpose has been being such a huge role, a huge leader within TD. So first question for you, what do you enjoy most about the talent development industry? In other words, what about working in the field is most rewarding for you?
Thank you. And just again, Anne, it's so good to hear you and to be with you. And I truly value our relationship over, as you said, the many years. And I appreciate all the very nice comments. And I did want to address one of your comments that you said, he's a legend in our field. And I have to say, I hope I'm really not a legend, because I would share with you, just as one of the first things, is that one of my greatest fears in life is not being relevant. Part of the reason why I'm so connected, or I try to be connected, if you will, stay on the grid, is so that, I remain relevant in our space. And as you know, our space is really changing. It's so dynamic, and change is such a constant that I find myself having to just constantly look to how I stay connected, stay relevant, always trying to be learning, what's working, what's not working, what's the latest that's emerging. Obviously we'll get into this a bit more in the conversation, but all things related to generative AI and machine learning, and all of that has been, I think, such a dynamic part in terms of driving such change, and so quickly that it continues to challenge me to stay on top of it. But to really answer your question, what brings me joy from our industry? I think at the highest level, when I think about answering that question, it's really around really seeing organizations working really, really well. By the way, that's close to a tagline for an organization I know very well, ATD, who has a similar sort of tagline around, making things work better, and really seeing that you can see greater optimization both in organizations, and then ultimately, within organizations, it's people that make organizations successful. obviously with the assistance of technology, but it's still people. I get a thrill from being able to help organizations to do better, to achieve their vision, mission, purpose, and goals. And at the same time, I take particular joy in seeing learning taking place and, seeing, if you will, the proverbial light bulbs going off. You can see how learning at the end of the day brings joy to so many people. I get to be a part of that. I get to be a co-creator of that. I get to be a co-facilitator of that. I get to collaborate with that. That's sort of the juice that keeps me really excited, particularly about our space. It's about how do we make organizations work better, and that gets done through people. How do we help people optimize and be better at what they're doing?
Think about the idea of self-actualization,
Absolutely.
Right? And the role that you play, that leaders in the field play in that for people is
Absolutely.
Incredible.
And that kind of connects me to another thing that I would say it's really important, which is when you think about self-actualization, it's that space or that place where you're completely in Zen, you're in flow with what your purpose is. One of the sayings that I always say to myself, in fact, I got this from one of our colleagues, I'm in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing for the right reason, and it brings me joy. And when you think about that, you're doing something in the flow that you clearly just love to do. And therefore, it's not work. And therefore, it's love. One of my favorite authors is Kahlil Gibran, and he talks about that work is love, because work really is a manifestation of love around creation, and that you are creating something to be part of that. That to me is very, very rejuvenating, exciting, and just gives me a great deal of energy.
What a gift that you have that experience, right, in your work. And then that part of your purpose is that the people you work with in organizations also get to experience that themselves, right? Yeah. Kimo, I'm curious, you've put a lot of work and intentionality into defining your purpose, your vision, your mission. I would love to hear, what's your guidance or your thoughts on that? Was that something you struck out to do for yourself? Is that something that kind of organically arose for you throughout your career?
It's a bit of both, but if you study the best kind of leaders in the world, all these leadership principles that we all know about, and the best in class leaders and best of the behavior that goes with that, it comes with this knowledge or understanding about what it means to be in flow, or being, again, Zen, is that you have a clear sense of your purpose. You have a clear sense as to why you're here at this moment doing what you're doing. And what it also really does is it helps me to make better decisions. Because I have those things in place for myself, I'm able to say what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And I will still say it's really hard for me to say no. That's one of the things I'm trying to get better at, is saying no. And yet it really helps me to have these purpose, vision, mission, values kind of spelled out for me personally, that I can make better decisions. At the end of the day, life is pretty short. Wouldn't it be good to fill those things with what you love to do and things that bring you joy?
Those are good yardsticks then, right? To keep yourself accountable to how you're spending your time, choices you're making.
Absolutely.
And even to be able to answer those questions, am I doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason? And when you can say yes, check. And when you're saying no, then that's kind of a redirect.
I ask myself the question, are you giving energy or taking energy? That's a good check, by the way. Like, okay, what I just said or did that give energy or did that take energy?
I'm stealing that. It's good. And joy is contagious.
It is very contagious.
Yeah. I'd like to touch on one more thing before we kind of shift away from your career and reflections there. But thinking about our audience of talent development leaders, current and aspiring, what is something that you want them to know? Perhaps something you wish you knew when you were at a certain point in your career, or something you recently learned that's stuck with you?
Again, it goes back to what I was saying all the before. Have that sense of clear purpose. And is this engagement or this opportunity that you're engaged in with right now, is it fulfilling that? And then be willing to do the hard work. The whole notion around learning, I think, is really important, like having clear sense of curiosity and being curious and being a lifelong learner.
Mhm.
I would hope that those are all things that resonate with you and you're able to, be able to do that in a positive way. At the end of the day, that gives you a sense of peace. And ultimately, you mentioned it, self-actualization and fulfillment. I've taught many, many classes in my lifetime, and I've had several people as a result of taking one of my classes said, you know what? I'm changing my job. I'm actually going to resign. And I was like, oh, no, don't do that. And yet they ended up in being in such a better place.
Imagine too, for leaders, if you're not in a role where you're embodying that joy, that purpose, mission values.
Yes.
For yourself, you're not, as you said, time is short, right? So,
yes.
So what are you doing? And then also for the people you're leading, I would say that rubs off. So if you're not aligned with your values and working in such a way that you aren't, that's not affecting only you.
Yeah. And does it give you energy? And if it's not, then I would look to then how do I move towards joy and then be able to kind of reframe things so that I can focus on what I truly want to do and what I'm good at, being able to get compensated or paid for it in a way that you want to be, that allows you to thrive.
Kimo, let's talk about some emerging trends. So we will shift a little bit here to the field itself, some more kind of tangible conversation around what's going on, what's coming next. And I would love to your perspective on even how this compares to what the field has been through or what we've experienced as talent development professionals, since you've been in the field. So kind of that context and that history would be interesting too. Fortune Deloitte published some research earlier this year, and they provided 3 key takeaways, and they surveyed CEOs. So these are from the perspective of CEOs. 3 key takeaways from surveyed execs. Number 1, they have an optimistic outlook. Number 2, they have their eyes on some major disruptors. And number 3, they're homed in on generative AI. Surprise, surprise. Can you talk more about these global macroeconomic trends and their implications on the TD field? And by the way, I think it's important to note that keeping our eyes on such trends is one important job for folks in this role, right? Kind of always looking out and not in, only scanning to see what's going on that's affecting our organizations and our function and how we might be able to be the eyes of the organization on these trends and understand their implications on the people in our organizations.
Absolutely. Again, this is one of the reasons why I've always been so connected to ATD. Exactly to one of the things that you've said is that it allows me to kind of go up and out. And by talking to colleagues in our field, attending an event as simple as this, you may pick up a nugget or two that you didn't have before, or an insight that you maybe didn't have before. And linking back to your question, it's really about context, from a business perspective in particular. And of course, when we think about that from a global frame, the world is forever, ever gotten smaller. And that whole notion of, probably heard this, that when a butterfly flaps its wings, it literally creates a tornado in another part of the world. And that's for real in the sense that change, you can just feel it ripple through. So I try to have my ear on the ground. That can also be completely all-consuming. So I find myself having to limit myself and to be selective around the channels that I take in, because I just can't read everything. And, I want to make sure that they're all verified sources, and I want to make sure that they're authentic and real. So I try to have a select list, when I think about where is the world going, or when I think about technology, where is that technology evolving? So I try to stay on touch on this from a global perspective, from a sustainability perspective. And, when I shared those reports with you from Fortune, for example, and Deloitte, the trend right now is, that I would say CEOs, generally speaking, are cautiously optimistic around where the economy is going. And I say that, by the way, and just yesterday, the stock market took a 2.6% hit, So again, it goes back to context and really understand what's going on. But just having that economic understanding and awareness is really important. And then if I bring that down to the company level, understanding one's business, how your company makes money, for example, and what are the important metrics that your company kind of lives and dies by, And do you know those metrics? Are you involved in those metrics? How is what you do helping those metrics? That's where I try to bring those two things together. What's happening on the macro, and at the same time on a micro level, what influence or contribution are you giving to helping move some of those key dashboard metrics within your organization in the right direction?
We talk about this a lot. Kimo's a member of CTDO Next, one of ATD senior leader membership groups. And this particular one is a small group of folks who goal charter is to shape the future of learning. And so we've currently been talking about this very issue of, it's a perennial challenge for the field. How do I prove the impact of talent on the business? And I think as you've summarized here, Kimo, really well, it's kind of the first step is understanding the big stuff, right? What's happening out here, the macro trends, and then getting a little narrower to your own business and organization, and understanding that language and how to communicate it as well, communicate the value that TD has on those goals. Let's look even narrower then at TD and what's top of mind for TD leaders now. So some of the major trends that we see within talent development, talent management.
As you know, I serve as the senior fellow with the conference board as a program director. And basically what that means is I facilitate a group of senior executives from the talent space, both on the European side based out of Brussels and on the US side based out of New York. And when I facilitate these meetings and the other meetings that I attend, like ATD, CTDO Next, for example, the top things that I just see emerging right to the top are, first of all, a real strong focus on how do we create and build a learning culture at an enterprise level. And I don't mean just nice learning for the sake of learning. I'm talking about an organization that is really nimble, that's really flexible, that's able to adapt, adjust to the context at any given time. So how do we do that? Learning in the flow of work, kind of a big example of that. The second one I would say is like all things related to skills. And that's really, I think, a very big topic. But if I were to kind of chunk that down just a little bit, I would say, how that links to competencies and how I think about skills and then emerging skills that we need for today, skills that we need for tomorrow. That, of course, then connects to this whole conversation of differentiating between skills and jobs. And then when I think about that on a bigger picture, I want to think about skills as they pertain to employability. And then you can make the connection to education. Is that learning and education that one is receiving, is that leading to you to have tangible skills, real skills, cognitive skills that one then can use to be employed for the future? Connected to this is this whole conversation of succession planning. And then you can build in performance management, engagement, retention, mobility. Probably have heard a lot of conversations taking place around this notion of a talent marketplace, then able to then say, using predictive analytics based on the behavior of within our organization. Do we have what we need for today? Do we have what we need for tomorrow? Do we have what we need from 3 years from now? All of that starts to play into this conversation. So succession planning becomes an important part of this conversation, the talent marketplace, both inside and outside the organization, thinking about all of that together. So that becomes a big topic. Many organizations are grappling with this whole conversation right now. Like, do I try to take this on big enterprise level, or do I try to take this on small? I think you have to listen to your organization to hear what is their appetite for this. If not, if they don't have an appetite to think about this from a bigger perspective, my recommendation would be to start small. Start with like the top 3 jobs that we need for today, and start with the top 3 jobs that we need for tomorrow. And I did say jobs, by the way, intentionally, because a job is a composition of skills. It includes a variety of different skills. So you can take those top 3 jobs, top 3 future jobs that we need. You can pull out what are those skills that we need. You can also look at what's in common between those 6 jobs that we talked about, and what are the common skills that we need. And that's just the place to start, to get you started on this journey to become better at that. The third big bucket, I would tell you that we're all very top of mind for us, and it's a trend, obviously, is this whole conversation on generative AI and machine learning. And because it is such a big conversation, it's not only what does it mean to the learning function, but what does it mean to the enterprise? When I think about literacy in this area, I kind of think about literacy at sort of 3 levels. And the first level of literacy, I kind of think I was like, am I literate in my own language? I think about literacy as an important topic. Then, of course, there's the cultural literacy within the culture of the organization. Then I think there's literacy taking place from a tech literacy. And then now I'm adding on this layer of AI literacy. I'm constantly now just trying to keep up in this space when it comes to AI to see how are the types of tools that are particularly coming out in the talent space, making us better. I find myself constantly having to stay up to speed or to try to stay in front of this. And that's not easy. What's going to happen within the organization is a senior leader is going to come to you and say, oh, from a learning perspective, what's your opinion? My recommendation would be don't wait to be asked. Take a leadership role in this space, pull together the various parts of the organization that need to be thinking about this. Obviously, very quickly, it would be operations, it would be technology, anything that's customer focused that we really need to get in front of, particularly to, provide a better customer service, better customer experience, better product, better loyalty. They all have to kind of then start to be at that table to say, okay, how are we going to put these tools to our best advantage? And then I would say the fourth bucket for me continues to be, and it's always kind of on my list, is all things leadership, focusing to leadership at all levels. How do we think about developing leaders at any level within the organization and being able to do that in a way that plays to the organization's purpose being vision, mission, and values as well, just for the organization. But how do I do that? Again, that's a lot of work. So those four things that I would really say, creating a learning culture enterprise-wide, focused on all things skills, second. Number three, focused on all things generative AI, machine learning. And then the fourth would be leadership at all levels.
Thank you, Kimo, for that kind of survey of the top trends and I would say challenges too for TD leaders. I'm curious if you found in your various roles now, so you work with a lot of execs and in a lot of different groups as an advisor and leader of these boards, are these trends resonating throughout? And have you seen them pop up with folks experiencing similar challenges or even common practices that they're using to address? And what might you say to TD leaders as they're kind of grappling with some of these things, really to find some sources for inspiration, either from peers or from places where you go to get some answers? One thing I'm learning from you, and even in this conversation, is the truth that about staying relevant, right? There's so many inputs that we can take. There's so much information out there, and the ability to stay curious, to stay connected as you are, and to know what's emerging now and next. The overwhelming nature of AI, and to stay on top of that and understand its implications for TD, that in itself is a full-time job. So all of that to say, kind of any distilled insights for TD leaders who might be feeling, slightly overwhelmed by all the information and inputs and how to make best use of it?
Thank you. Great question. I would really start with just the listen, and then listen some more. From listening, you have to move to activation. So then that listening then leads to thinking about strategy. So by taking in all that information, then how do you pull together what should be in this case, if we're thinking organizationally, then what should be the learning strategy? Obviously, there's tools starting with a SWOT analysis and that you can use to be able to pull that together, and then thinking about, operational excellence and being able to execute that and good project management, so all aspects of that then leading to, within the context of the organization, how is our function, the learning function, really supporting and enabling the business? But it does start with listening. And so I would encourage, if you're new in role, Michael Watkins' work on First 90 Days, love that work, and really listening to the customer. And whether that being a paying guest or a fellow team member or an associate, those are my customers. What is the challenge that they're facing, and how can I make it easier or better? You really have to then be able to execute against that, and you have to be focused to be able to accomplish that, and then to decide what's in and what's not in. What are we going to say no to, or what am I going to then contract additional support services to make that happen? At the end of the day, you're limited with resources. There has to be trade-offs that take place in order to accomplish something, and you have to do that in a focused way.
Kimo, as we wrap up today, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're up to now. Obviously, we heard at the beginning all of the things, but really what you might be especially focused on, particular passion area, as you think about what you're doing in the next couple of months, and then maybe where you see your next steps landing?
Thank you. That's an exciting question of what's up. As you probably know, I really enjoy traveling, and I particularly like working and traveling. So I really love going to different places, organizations, and being exposed to what's going on in that particular world, and then experiencing and being a part of it, helping where I possibly can. So I'm energized by summer's, kind of, I can't believe it's August, and it's just flying by. Yeah. And then at the same time, I kind of look, here we go for fall, obviously school starting up. What I'm energized by, obviously, from an American context, is the opportunities that lie ahead of us. Obviously, this is an election year coming up, so I think that's going to bring about a lot of opportunities. Again, on a macro scale, I will continue to work from a global perspective and continue to travel extensively, around the world, and continue to learn as much as I can. And I will continue to focus on those organizations where we are making a difference in creating greater access to learning and education. I tend to go where those organizations that are doing that, and I try to see how I can help them to do that well. And I mentioned, and we talked a little bit before, I do quite a lot in the not-for-profit space. So I think we're looking to see from a not-for-profit perspective, where are there opportunities we can garner more support, more resources to be able to accomplish our vision as an organization. So that's really kind of what I'm focused on, is how do I help to bring in more of that, to do more of that within the organizations that I serve. At the same time, I get totally energized by the fact that we are and have been able to accomplish so much because of the continued success that we've had. Kind of bringing us back to ATD, I can remember being a chapter member 35 years ago, and what that chapter meant to me has played, to this day, it plays a significant influence. And those colleagues, friends, to this day, I'm still connected to those people. So I'm very grateful for the communities that I belong to, obviously ATD being one of them, where it's part of my extended family. One of the things I've kind of taken stock in is like the phrase, your network is your net worth. Boy, I never try to forget that. So that means always trying to pay it back and always try to do that with integrity and living one's best life. So with all that you're saying, and I hope to do that in a healthy way, because we're all not getting younger, to be able to create those opportunities to express more love and to connect with, be it with friends and families and colleagues. That's what I'm really excited about, looking forward to for the fall season that's coming up.
Well, Kimo, representing ATD, we appreciate all of your contributions, your leadership, the many ways that you give back to the association, and certainly feel that love from you. Would appreciate your telling listeners how they might connect with you to ask any of their own questions or continue the conversation.
Sure. I'm happy. Feel free to share my email, make reference to this webcast if they want to, so where we can connect. And then obviously LinkedIn, is another place. And I would also say, if you're not connected to your local chapter, I strongly encourage that you do that. In fact, I'm coming to you from Warsaw, Poland today, but tonight the DC chapter has a past president's happy hour call that I'm going to go to. Yeah.
Nice. So good.
And again, that was many years ago. Like that was in the early 2000s, I'm going to really attend that. And just again, I learned so much from those calls. Again, how to stay connected. The other thing is to think about, what is your personal development plan? What are you doing to be a better you? That in itself is very exciting to think about how do you be a better you?
Kimo, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing more about your career, for your learnings, for inspiring all of us. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and all the best. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.